I bought my lakefront house in Lakeside Estates thinking I'd finally found peace. After 15 years as an investigative journalist, covering corruption scandals and fraudulent schemes, I wanted quiet mornings on my private dock with nothing but coffee and the sound of water lapping against wooden posts. My name is Owen Marlowe, and I should have known better than to think suburban life would be simple. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first: tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and a community that actually waved when you drove past. The lake was the real selling point, though. My property deed clearly showed a private dock extending 20 feet into the water, marked as belonging exclusively to my address. No easements, no shared access, just mine. I met Sharon Petton 3 days after moving in. She appeared at my door wearing a navy polo shirt with HOA President embroidered across the chest, carrying a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. Her smile was wide, but her eyes had that calculating look I'd seen before in people who enjoyed power a little too much. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, handing me a thick binder of HOA rules. "I run a tight ship here. We maintain standards. I'm sure you'll fit right in as long as you follow the guidelines." Something about the way she said, "follow the guidelines," felt less like friendly advice and more like a warning. I thanked her politely and watched as she walked back down my driveway, stopping to examine my mailbox like she was inspecting it for violations. Over the next few months, I noticed things. Sharon seemed to be everywhere, measuring the height of someone's hedge, photographing a car parked on the street, leaving violation notices on doors for infractions so minor they seemed invented. My neighbor Russell mentioned she'd tried pressuring him to share his dock for community events. When he refused, he suddenly got cited for landscaping violations. That should have been my first real warning, but I was focused on my writing, trying to transition from investigative pieces to fiction. I ignored the red flags. That was my mistake. The first time I woke to the sound of strangers on my dock, I thought I was hearing things. It was 7 in the morning on a Saturday, and loud laughter echoed across the water. I walked to my bedroom window and felt my blood pressure spike instantly. 6 people I'd never seen before had set up a full breakfast party on my property. Camping chairs formed a semicircle around a portable grill. A cooler the size of a small refrigerator sat open, filled with beer bottles. 2 kayaks were tied to my dock posts. A woman in a bright yellow bikini posed for selfies, while a man flipped burgers, the smell of charcoal drifting up to my window. I threw on clothes and headed outside. Every step down the wooden dock made a hollow thudding sound, but they didn't notice. They were too busy clinking beer bottles and laughing like they owned the place. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm Owen. I own this property, including this dock. I need you all to pack up and leave." The silence that followed made my skin prickle. Then the woman in the yellow bikini laughed, genuinely amused, like I'd told the funniest joke she'd heard all week. "We're allowed to be here," she said, waving her phone at me. "Sharon told us we could use the community dock for the morning." I felt my jaw tighten. This isn't a community dock. This is private property, my private property. The community dock is about 200 yards that way. The guy at the grill stood up, tall and clearly trying to intimidate me. "Look, man, we paid for dock access. Sharon cleared it with the HOA. If you've got a problem, take it up with her, not us." Paid for dock access. The words hit me like a slap. They'd paid someone to use my dock. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the path. Sharon Petton appeared, wearing her HOA president polo and carrying her clipboard, smiling like she was about to win an argument she'd already rehearsed. "Owen," Sharon called out, her voice dripping with false cheer. "I heard you were causing a disturbance. Is there a problem here?" I gestured to the 6 people still camped on my dock. "Yes, Sharon. These people are on my private property and they need to leave." She looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. All the docks in this community fall under shared usage rights. It's part of the HOA guidelines. I pulled out my phone and opened my scanned property documents. According to my land deed and survey, this dock is explicitly listed as private property deeded exclusively to this address. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it. Sharon barely glanced at my phone. She waved her hand dismissively. Those old deeds don't reflect current community standards. We've implemented revised asset allocation protocols under updated bylaws. The HOA board voted on a dock sharing program 6 months ago. It's for the good of the entire community. My investigative instincts kicked in immediately. That phrase, revised asset allocation protocols, was bureaucratic nonsense designed to sound official. Something was deeply wrong here. What meeting was that vote taken in? I asked. I don't remember receiving notice about any dock sharing program. Sharon's smile tightened. It was discussed at the April general meeting. You would know that if you'd bothered to attend. I had attended the April meeting. I'd sat through 90 minutes of landscaping regulations and parking violations. There had been zero mention of any dock program, but I didn't say that yet. Instead, I watched Sharon turn to the group on my dock and give them a reassuring nod. Don't worry, folks. Mr. Marlowe is just having trouble understanding how community living works. You have every right to be here. The tall guy smirked. The woman went back to taking photos. Sharon looked at me with an expression that clearly said, "What are you going to do about it?" I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Wide shots of the people, close-ups of their setup, a clear image of Sharon in her HOA polo. She noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," I said. "Timestamps, faces, evidence of trespassing." Sharon leaned closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You're making a mistake, Owen. You don't want to be the guy who fights the HOA. Trust me on that." There it was, the threat. Not thinly veiled, just a straightforward warning that if I pushed back, there would be consequences. I looked at her, then at the people still lounging on my dock. "We'll see," I said, then walked back to my house. As I reached my door, I heard Sharon say something that made the group laugh. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. She just told them I was the problem. Inside, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. If Sharon wanted to play this game, fine, but she'd made a critical error. She'd underestimated who she was dealing with. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened again and again. Different groups, different days, always the same pattern. Strangers using my dock like it was public property. I started documenting everything. I installed security cameras with timestamps and motion detection. I logged 18 separate incidents of trespassing in 14 days. But the real discovery came when I started tracking these people online. One group had posted photos on social media, tagging their location and adding hashtags about lake rentals and weekend getaways. That's when I found it. An active listing on a vacation rental platform advertising private lakefront dock access for $50 per day. The photos were unmistakable. My dock, my neighbor's docks, the distinctive shoreline of our community. The host profile belonged to someone named Sharon P., with a 5-star rating and dozens of positive reviews praising the beautiful lake access and convenient location. Sharon wasn't just overstepping her authority. She was running a commercial fraud operation, charging people to use property that didn't belong to her. And she'd been doing it for months. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't about HOA overreach anymore. This was criminal. I took screenshots of everything, the listing, the reviews, the prices, the booking calendar. Then I started building my case. My years as an investigative journalist had taught me one crucial lesson: evidence wins arguments. And I was about to gather enough evidence to bury Sharon Pettin's little scheme. I sent a formal request to the HOA board asking for all meeting minutes from the past 2 years, specifically any discussions about dock usage or shared access programs. I cited the state law that granted me access to these records and copied all 5 board members. The treasurer, Pauline Drexel, responded within 24 hours. She'd be happy to provide the minutes and would send them by the end of the week. No pushback, no hostility. That told me something important. Not everyone on the board was in on Sharon's scheme. When the minutes arrived, I went through them page by page. Landscaping debates, parking complaints, pool maintenance schedules. But nowhere, not in any meeting over 2 years, was there mention of a dock sharing program or any vote changing property usage rights. Sharon's board-approved program didn't exist. She'd made it up. Next, I requested the HOA's financial statements. When they arrived, I found something that made me sit up straight. A revenue line item labeled Facility Rental Income, totaling $3,200 over 3 months. No explanation, no breakdown, just vague income that somehow appeared in HOA accounts. I pulled up a calculator. $50 per booking times $3,200. That's 64 bookings in 3 months, roughly 5 bookings per week. The numbers matched perfectly with what I was seeing on my security footage. Sharon wasn't just renting out my dock. She was renting out multiple docks and funneling the money through HOA accounts to make it look legitimate. I reached out to my neighbors who also own private docks, Russell, Iris, and Fletcher. We met at a coffee shop away from the neighborhood. I showed them everything. The security footage, the rental listing, the financial records, the timeline connecting it all. Iris, who worked as a financial consultant, looked at the numbers and shook her head. This is embezzlement on top of fraud. If she's using HOA funds for personal gain, that's criminal. We formed an alliance right there. All 4 of us agreed to pool our evidence and coordinate our response. I found a property rights attorney with a strong track record in HOA disputes and scheduled a consultation. When I met with him, I brought everything. He spent an hour reviewing the materials, then looked up at me. "You have an exceptionally strong case. What she's doing constitutes trespassing, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly embezzlement." He paused. "But I need to warn you, people like this don't back down easily. When cornered, they escalate. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the 18 times strangers had trespassed on my property while Sharon collected money from them. I thought about the neighbors she'd intimidated into silence. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." The attorney began drafting a cease and desist letter. It was time to make this official. The cease and desist letter arrived at Sharon's house via certified mail on a Tuesday morning. The tracking system sent me a notification the moment she signed for it. The letter was direct and legally precise, detailing every instance of trespassing, citing relevant property laws, referencing the fraudulent rental listing, and demanding immediate cessation of all unauthorized dock usage. Sharon called me within 2 hours, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "How dare you threaten to sue the HOA? Do you have any idea what kind of damage this will do to our community?" I kept my tone calm. "Sharon, I'm asking you to stop violating the law. Stop renting out property that doesn't belong to you. It's really that simple." She let out a bitter laugh. "I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I know how things work here. And I promise you, Owen, if you keep pushing this, I will find every single violation on your property and fine you for each one." Classic intimidation, the same tactic she'd used on everyone else. "I've already documented everything on my property, Sharon. I'm in full compliance, but feel free to inspect if you'd like. I'll be happy to provide access with my attorney present." The line went silent, then her voice came back colder now. "You're going to regret this." She hung up. 3 days later, Sharon made her move. She posted an announcement in the community discussion group. A community appreciation day scheduled for the upcoming Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. The location was listed simply as lakefront area, but when I checked the details, my stomach tightened. She was planning to hold the event at my dock and my neighbor's docks, the exact properties we just sent cease and desist letters about. The post was carefully worded to sound innocent. Let's come together as a community to celebrate the spirit of cooperation and mutual support that makes Lakeside Estates special. The comment section filled quickly with enthusiastic responses. People were excited. They had no idea it was a deliberate provocation designed to force a confrontation. Sharon was betting I wouldn't actually call the police on dozens of families. She was betting the social pressure would be too much. She'd badly miscalculated. I called my attorney immediately. She's organizing a mass trespassing event. He didn't hesitate. You document everything, and when they refuse to leave, you call the sheriff's department. This actually strengthens your case. Public witnesses, clear documentation, undeniable proof she's willfully violating the cease and desist order. I contacted the sheriff's non-emergency line and explained the situation. The deputy asked me to email copies of my property documents and the cease and desist letter. We'll have units in the area on Saturday, he said. If you call, we'll respond. My 3 neighbors and I met one final time. We coordinated our approach, positioned security cameras, and prepared our documentation. We'd give one clear warning, then let law enforcement handle it. Saturday was 4 days away. 4 days before Sharon's carefully constructed facade came crashing down, Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, warm sunshine. By 1:30 in the afternoon, people were already gathering near the lakefront. Families with coolers, kids with pool toys, laughter drifting across the water. At 1:45, I walked down to my dock. My 3 neighbors stood at their property lines. 2 neutral board members stood nearby as witnesses. We'd marked the boundaries with bright orange, private property, no trespassing signs. By 2 o'clock, the crowd had swelled to at least 40 people. Sharon stood at the center wearing her HOA president polo, holding a wireless microphone like she was hosting a festival. Tables with food, a portable sound system, supplies for a 4-hour party, all of it being set up on private property without permission. I watched people spread across the 3 docks, claiming spots, unfolding chairs. Kids jumped into the water. Adults opened drinks and fired up grills. I took a breath and called out loud enough to be heard. "Excuse me, everyone. I need your attention, please." The noise dropped. People turned to look. I'm Owen Marlowe, and this dock, along with my neighbor's docks, is privately owned. Please move to the community dock area about 200 yards down the shore. This area isn't open for public use. Immediate confusion, irritation. Someone shouted, "Are you serious right now?" Sharon stepped forward, raising her microphone. "Everyone, please don't worry. Mr. Marlowe is confused about community property rights. You have every right to be here. This is a sanctioned HOA event." She turned to face me directly. "Owen, I'm giving you one chance to stop this harassment. If you continue interfering with a community event, you'll be in violation of HOA conduct rules." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "This is private property. You've been asked to leave. If you refuse, I'm calling the sheriff's department to report trespassing." The crowd erupted. "You're going to call the cops on families." Sharon's voice cut through. "You cannot call the police on a community event, Owen. That's illegal." I met her eyes. "Actually, Sharon, when people refuse to leave after a clear warning, calling law enforcement is exactly the proper step." I dialed. The dispatcher answered. I gave my address and explained calmly. "I have approximately 40 people trespassing on private property. I've asked them to leave and they've refused. I need deputies to respond." Sharon's voice rose behind me. "He's actually calling the police. Can you believe this?" 15 minutes later, 2 sheriff's vehicles arrived. 2 deputies approached professionally. One recognized me from our earlier conversation. "You're the property owner who called." I nodded and handed him my property deed, survey map, and title documents. This is my dock, private property, clearly marked. I asked these people to leave and they refused. The deputy examined the documents carefully. This is definitely private property. He turned to Sharon. Ma'am, are you the person who organized this event? Sharon's expression shifted from confident to defensive. I'm the HOA president. This is a community event on community property. The deputy shook his head. Ma'am, I've just confirmed with the property records. This is private property. The HOA doesn't have authority over privately owned docks. That's not, these docks fall under shared usage protocols. We have authorization. Do you have written authorization from the property owners? Sharon sputtered. I don't need authorization. I'm the HOA president. Ma'am, HOA authority doesn't extend to private property without owner consent. That's when I handed the deputy my evidence folder. Screenshots of the vacation rental listing with Sharon's host profile. Financial records showing $3,200 in unexplained facility rental income. The timeline matching rental bookings to security footage. Reviews from renters specifically mentioning dock access. The deputy flipped through slowly, his expression growing more serious. Ma'am, have you been renting out docks that don't belong to you? Sharon's face went pale, then flushed red. Those are voluntary contributions. The deputy looked at the rental listing showing $50 per day. This looks like a commercial rental operation, and according to these financial records, the income is going through HOA accounts. Sharon's composure cracked. I did this for the community, to fund events. These people don't care about the community. They just want to hoard their private property while everyone else suffers. The treasurer stepped forward. I had no knowledge of this rental income until Mr. Marlowe requested financial records. There was no authorization for any rental program. Another board member nodded. We never voted on any dock sharing program. I would have remembered that. The crowd had gone completely silent. Someone in the back muttered, Wait, she was charging people to use other people's property. The deputy closed the folder. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to provide a statement. We need to investigate potential fraud and misappropriation of funds. Sharon looked around wildly. This is insane. I'm being persecuted for trying to help the community, she pointed at me. He's the one who called the police on families. That should be illegal. You're committing a felony right now. The deputy remained calm. Ma'am, calling law enforcement to report trespassing on private property is not illegal. It's exactly what property owners are supposed to do. Now, I need you to come with me. As he escorted her toward his vehicle, the crowd began dispersing. Some looked embarrassed, others angry, though now I couldn't tell at whom. One man approached, red-faced. I had no idea this was your private dock. Sharon told us it was community property. I'm sorry. The deputy who'd examined my evidence walked over. We'll be opening a full investigation. Based on what I've seen, there are likely multiple violations. You did everything right. I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. It was over. The truth was out. The week following the confrontation was a blur. The sheriff's department opened a formal investigation. I spent 2 hours at the station providing a detailed statement and turning over all my evidence. Within 3 days, Sharon was formally charged with 18 counts of criminal trespass and 1 count of fraud related to the unauthorized rental operation. The HOA held an emergency board meeting. The board voted unanimously to remove Sharon as president effective immediately. They also initiated a full forensic audit of the finances going back 3 years. The results were damning. Over $8,000 in unexplained facility rental income deposited into HOA accounts over 8 months. None authorized, none documented, none used for legitimate HOA expenses. She was running a rental business using other people's property, the treasurer told me, her voice tight with anger, and funneling the money through our accounts to make it look legitimate. The community reaction was complicated. Some apologized directly, admitting they'd been manipulated. Others remained cold, still viewing me as the person who'd called cops on a neighborhood gathering. But the online discussion group shifted dramatically. People started sharing their own stories of Sharon's intimidation. The arbitrary violation notices, the threats, the way she'd used her position to punish disagreement. One person posted, "I'm starting to realize that what we called strong leadership was actually just bullying with a clipboard." My neighbors and I filed a joint civil lawsuit for trespassing damages and breach of fiduciary duty. 6 weeks later, Sharon's attorney reached out with a settlement offer. Sharon would plead guilty to the criminal charges in exchange for 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and $12,000 in restitution split among the 4 of us. She'd also be permanently banned from holding any HOA position in the state. The civil lawsuit would be settled for an additional $15,000. I accepted, not because I needed the money, but because it established on record that what she'd done was wrong. That property rights matter. The HOA underwent significant reforms. The treasurer became president and implemented new oversight procedures, revised bylaws with clearer checks and balances, and established committees to prevent abuse of authority. 3 months after the confrontation, Sharon sold her house and moved out of state. The community slowly returned to normal, though normal now included much more engaged homeowners who paid closer attention to HOA decisions and asked more questions about financial records. My dock was quiet again. No unauthorized parties, no trespassers, just the occasional kayaker passing by on public water. 3 months later, I found myself on my dock on a quiet Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching mist rise off the water. The kind of morning I'd imagined when I first bought this house. My neighbor joined me. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the water. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about everything that happened. I'm glad you didn't just accept Sharon's intimidation and keep your head down. I'm glad you fought back." I took a sip of coffee. I didn't feel glad at the time. I felt like the most hated person in the neighborhood. He chuckled. "Yeah, well, that's how it goes sometimes. Do the right thing, get vilified for it, then eventually people figure out you were right all along." He was right. Most people don't want conflict. They'll put up with unfairness to avoid making waves. It takes someone stubborn enough to actually push back. The strangest part was that I'd moved here to escape investigative work. I wanted peace and quiet. Instead, I ended up doing the biggest investigation of my life right in my own backyard. We sat watching the morning sun burn off the mist and turn the lake into a mirror of gold and blue. Eventually he stood. "Well, I'll let you enjoy your coffee in peace. I just wanted to say thanks for not backing down." After he left, I stayed on the dock thinking about justice and community and what it means to be a good neighbor. The truth had won, not because I was lucky or vindictive, but because I documented everything, followed proper legal procedures, and trusted that evidence would speak louder than manipulation. That's the lesson I carried forward. Justice doesn't come from anger or revenge. It comes from facts, from process, from standing firm on principle when the whole world tells you you're wrong. The lake reflected everything that had happened, everything that had changed. Peace, when earned, feels different. I finished my coffee and walked back to my house. The dock was mine. The law had confirmed it. And I'd learned that doing the right thing is often the hardest thing, and that's exactly when it matters most. The sunlight caught on the water as I walked away, rippling gold across the lake's surface. For the first time in months, there was no tension, no noise, just calm. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, and earned one careful step at a time.